Benedict Bridgerton, you count your days. To the people who warned me that I would get really annoyed at Benedict in his book, you were right. You were so dead on right. I have never been so viscerally angry at a man. I actually had to stop reading to stop myself from yelling at one point. I completely understand why they pushed back Benedict's season and have done Colin and Penelope instead, because I think they need to really rethink his whole season, because there is no way that they can turn the way that he acted. His entire plot is basically blackmailing a girl into becoming his mistress because he thinks that she's so beneath him that he doesn't want to actually marry her. And never mind the fact that at the very beginning of the book, Violet Bridgerton tells her son Benedict, her loser of a son Benedict, that she would be happy if her children married paupers as long as her children were happy. She gives him permission from the very beginning, and he chooses to just, I don't know, ignore it? I'm so angry. I'm so irrationally angry at him. I just think it's incredibly hypocritical because he spends the majority of the book scorning society and all the rules that society has, but also he won't even try to bend them at all. And the way he treats Sophie and diminishes her and doesn't even attempt to see things from her perspective, it drove me insane. By the time I got to the end of the book, I was actually a bit more okay with him because I, much like Sophie, had just been worn down and was so exhausted that I just gave up and accepted him for who he was. But there's a point in the middle of the book, and if you really don't want spoilers, then, well, you probably shouldn't have been watching this anyway, because I've already given a few away, but really scroll now. Save it, come back later, maybe, you know, interact, hey. But there was a point in the middle of the story where Benedict has been ill for like a week or two, and they're staying at a cottage, and Sophie's been nursing him back to health, and she's very adamant and very secretive and protective of herself, because she knows Benedict. She's been in love with Benedict for like 2 years. He doesn't recognize her. There's a whole hoo-ha of a masquerade ball in the Cinderella story, which I didn't love how it was such a carbon copy of a Cinderella story, but either way. So Sophie has been helping take care of Benedict and nurse him back into health because he grew very, very ill when he saved her from a very horrible situation, and he's waiting before he takes her back to London because he has offered her work at his mother's house. But Sophie's been refusing this because she's desperately in love with Benedict and he doesn't recognize her, and she doesn't really know how to bring it up because it's a very awkward thing to bring up. Anyway, he starts to feel really attracted to Sophie, even though he doesn't really know who she is, but he knows that she's a servant and thus beneath him. So he goes for a swim in the lake to, you know, cool down, and she stumbles across him, and then they, like, you know, one thing leads to another. They start making out, blah blah blah. Anyway, he's like, you are definitely becoming my mistress now, because she's already refused this numerous times for, you know, obvious reasons. She's an illegitimate child. She doesn't want to put anyone through that, and she also just wants to, you know, be chosen and have legitimate kids and get married and have that life, which is, you know, a completely reasonable thing to want. But Benedict is like, no, you're my mistress now, it can't be otherwise. And she's like, no, I'm not gonna happen, no way in hell. And he's like, well, you're still coming to London and working for my mother, so I can basically keep you around. And she's like, no, actually, I'd rather not. I'd really rather not. And so Benedict Bridgerton, he threatens to turn her over to the magistrate for theft, which could get her hung or sent to Australia. And for those of you who don't understand what was going on with Australia at that time, do look it up. It's a very important part of history that we should all really be aware of. And put its way, not a vacation, not a good part of history, very bad part of British history, as most things are. Anyway, he basically threatens to, like, end her life if she doesn't agree to basically be shackled to him as a mistress or still just as a servant but in his mother's house. Unforgivable. Unforgivable. I couldn't really get through the rest of the book without just remembering that he had done this thing. Even though he was, like, apologetic about it at the end, I still couldn't get over the fact that he had even thought that that was a reasonable or good thing to do. It's so beyond the pale. And the fact that this book was titled An Offer from a Gentleman. A gentleman! Where? So I think it's time that I issue a formal apology to Anthony Bridgerton, because I was a little harsh with you, clearly, in my last video. You are, as it seems, an angel amongst men, apparently. No, actually, I really still don't like your behavior at the beginning of the book. I really thought that was really quite bleh. But either way, could be so much worse. It's Colin and Penelope's book now, and I wish I could say I was excited, but I am slightly dreading it. And that makes me really sad because Penelope is by far my favorite character.